I have never been to war, but if you, like me, have suffered from someone else's addiction, then you probably have suffered trauma. Hi, I'm Gina with Hope and Cope. Here we talk about how to have our best life in spite of the painful and sometimes even tragic events and situations in life. Today we're going to talk about the trauma that comes from living with someone with addiction and how that affects us weeks, months, and even years into the future. I don't know what kind of person can go through addiction with another human being and not be traumatized by it. There are financial traumas. There are so many fears. I remember being afraid that my husband was dead. I remember being afraid that he had killed someone else. There's a lot of lack of trust. You cannot depend on anything they say, anything they commit to. There's a lot of breaches of values, marital bonds. A lot of those things crumble to the ground with addiction, and those things bring a lot of trauma. When we are constantly overwhelmed by the anxiety of living with someone with addiction, it completely has the capacity to change who we are. It can. I know for myself, I will just speak for myself, it caused me to be paranoid, resentful, bitter. It made me hard-hearted and vengeful, and with this sense of impending doom, like the bottom was going to fall out of my world all the time. When we have suffered trauma, we need to try very hard to not project onto other people the harms caused by one individual. So, for example, if it is a betrayal by a husband or a wife, it does no good to make blanket statements like all men are blah, blah, blah. If we have had a bad experience with a young adult, to just make this broad statement that all young people are fill in the blank, just something negative. I don't even want to say those things, but when we say things, all men, all women, all children, or all young people, all addicts, even if we say all addicts are XYZ, sometimes we're just painting too broad of a brush and we just sweep a lot of innocent people up in something like that, and it will affect the way we treat people. If I look at men and say all men are untrustworthy, then whether I mean to or not, it will affect the way I just conduct myself in the presence of half of the population on this planet. Even when we have been hurt, we need to take the time to evaluate every person, every situation, every relationship on its own merits, and not judge people by the conducts of someone else in our life. Do yourself a favor, do a kindness for yourself, and don't let the past rob you from a pleasant day today or from a good future. One positive response to trauma would be to learn from past experience. I'm not even saying from past mistakes. They may not have been mistakes, but learn from past experience. We can try to prevent things from happening in the future by just being cautious. For example, if you have been hurt by a relationship in the past, I think it would be wise to not rush into a new committed relationship, whether that's a best friend, a roommate, going in with someone in a business venture, or if you're talking about a spouse, a husband, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it is, just don't rush into those relationships. I have heard this good rule of thumb, I think would be helpful to pass on to you, and that is to know somebody for at least one calendar year. So go through all the different seasons, all the different situations, go through the holidays with them, see how they treat their mom on Mother's Day and on her birthday, and see how they behave with the family in the holidays, and see what kind of priorities they make. Are they doing volunteer things, and are they committed to a church or some kind of organization where they are helpful and giving of their time? And just wait. Don't rush in and make the same mistakes over and over and over again, and then open yourself up to new trauma. Sometimes we do think like all young people are the same, or all men are the same, or all women are the same, or whatever it comes out to be. All bosses are the same, whatever it is. I'm trying to not just build one little square box for you. But sometimes we kind of set ourselves up, we make the same mistakes, and so we get the same results, even if it's with a different person. So just try to learn from past experience. I've learned for myself that if I can learn something from a hurtful past experience, it does help to take some of the sting out. And I can say, well, I am wiser from that situation, and I don't think I'll make that mistake again, or here's how I would do something differently now that maybe would prevent this kind of hurtful situation. And then that puts you somewhat in the driver's seat, and not in the victim position, but in a position where you have a measure of control over the situation that you're in, or the situation you will be in the next time in the future. So if I could just make a couple suggestions. I know that trauma is real. I have had my own share of trauma, but the best advice I could give you is try to leave the past in the past. Try to realize that this event or this thing that happened to you, even though for me it wasn't a one-time event, right? It was over 10 long years of wounding through my husband's addiction. But nevertheless, the more I dragged the past into today, the more that trauma, the more that thing that happened, let's say 5 years ago, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, was still able to wound me today. And then when we project that onto others, then we are harming others that things are not their fault. They didn't do the harm, and yet we're projecting onto them. So we don't want to bring the past into the future. We don't want to project onto other people. I'm not trying to say to pretend like we weren't traumatized. I'm not trying to say to delegitimize the pain that we've been through. We can feel the feelings. We can admit they were real. We can admit they were horrible and painful and undeserved. And we can still try to recognize that we don't want to let them have more and more power over us in the future. And if that person in your life is a person that is trying to redeem themselves, maybe it is a loved one that's been through recovery and they're really trying to build back, we don't want to prevent them from being able to gain back positions that they've lost, but now they're trying to earn back in our life. We don't want unforgiveness and trauma to rob us from something that might be very, very beneficial to us in the future. It doesn't mean we have to dive in and fall back into some old harmful patterns. It just means we're going to try to leave the past in the past and try to let the future unfold naturally without, not the wisdom of the past, but the trauma and the pain of the past. My last little tidbit of advice that you might find helpful is to realize that you are not the only one that's been traumatized. We live in a world full of people that have been traumatized. I would venture to say the people in my life that have hurt me the worst have their own deep, deep trauma. So if we can realize that old saying that hurt people, then it does help us to not feel unique in this world, not feel entitled in this world that we get to be the only one to bear this badge of victimhood, that we can say, I have been hurt, but the person that hurt me was just a flawed and wounded person. And that helps me. I hope that helps you. And I hope this video was helpful. That's always my goal, is to make a video that's going to be helpful to you. And I always try to add a little something extra for you in the description box if you want to take a minute, stick around for that. And if this was helpful, please hit the thumbs up button. And if you can think of someone that it would be helpful to, please share it with a friend. I am putting out content twice a week, so be looking for that. And I love you, and I'm praying for you. And until next time, God bless.